Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Micah. This is Winston. You guys are rocking with us on Micah's Intellectual Corner. On today's episode, we are diving back into some kings and generals. This is the end. This is the last episode of, or the last video in the series of Winter War. How the Red Army finally defeated the Finns. Without further ado, though, just like always, we're just going to dive right into it. So let's roll.
In the previous episodes, we have watched as the Soviets were defeated or stopped on each and every front by the resilient Finnish forces. Their initial invasion was very badly prepared and executed, and as a result, thousands of soldiers paid with their lives. Meanwhile, at the Karelian Isthmus, the Mannerheim Line remained unbreakable, a bastion for Finland's hope. Now that the Soviets have reorganized their forces and have amassed over 30 divisions on the Karelian Isthmus, a decisive operation is on the horizon. It's now or never for the Soviet Union in our 5th video on the Winter War.
And as we all know, too, a big portion of the reason why Soviet Union was losing the way that they were was mainly because, one, they didn't, in my opinion, the terrain that they were dealing with out in Finland was not the best because, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Finland has a crap ton of forests and a crap ton of lakes and stuff like that, because if I'm not mistaken, like long ago during the Ice Age, that was pretty much all glacier right there, so whenever it receded, that's pretty, it opened up a lot of lakes and stuff like that. But on top of that, we also can't forget Stalin's infamous, purge of his army, where he got rid of essentially all of the great, generals, except for like maybe 2 or 3, and Georgy Zhukov and a few more of them. And on top of that, I'm sure their equipment wasn't the most, creme de la creme. So, without further ado, though, we'll go ahead and get into it. So let's go ahead and see what's going on.
The Soviet High Command was highly disillusioned by Merezhkov's performance and decided to replace him with Timoshenko, sending him 21 fresh divisions to prepare for a renewed offensive operation. As such, the 7th Army was reorganized into the Northwestern Front under Timoshenko himself, with Zhern's 8th, Choikov's 9th, and Frolov's 14th armies directly reporting to Marshal Voroshilov's High Command. Timoshenko was ordered to breach the Mannerheim Line by any means necessary and bring the war to the Finnish heartland. Merezhkov was then reassigned to lead the new 7th Army on the western side of the front, with 14 divisions in total, as he received 5 as reinforcement. Furthermore, 9 new divisions were assigned into the newly assembled 13th Army under Grendal, placed on the eastern side of the front, and the other 7 divisions were designated as General Reserve for the operation. With so many troops on a single front, the Soviets had to divide their forces to maintain control over them, with Merezhkov forming 5 army corps and Grendal forming 3. In contrast, the Finns on the Mannerheim Line were worn out after a month of intense fighting. Their fortifications were in a bad state, as throughout December and January, the Soviet artillery had shelled their positions daily. And the Finnish forces were not only exhausted from resisting the Soviet onslaught, but also from repairing the dugouts and assault obstacles after the relentless enemy bombardment. The commander of the Army of the Isthmus, General Osterman, had grouped his troops into 2 formations: the Western 2nd Army Corps around Suma under General Åquist, and the Eastern 3rd Army Corps in the Taipale sector, led by General Heinrichs. Behind them, the Finns had the poorly manned interim line, with
And if I'm not mistaken, too, although they're, the Finnish army are few and spread out, they're mainly held up in these very, very fortified bunkers and stuff like that, that are very hard to get through. And essentially, if I'm not mistaken, especially on the right side, where it's like they only have like 2 or 3 set up, like it's like super fortified, which is why we see them not being able to get through, even though it looks like they should be able to. Let's see.
With only a few emplacements and facilities for the defense of these positions. And behind this lay the final obstacle for the Soviet advance, the inadequately fortified rear line, which ran from Viipuri to Kupasari and from there to Kakisalmi. Although the Finns were heavily outnumbered, with only 8 divisions against the overwhelming 30 Soviet divisions, the defenders were prepared to fight to the last. On February 1st, Timoshenko launched his offensive. On the Suma and Lada sectors, the 3rd Division of Colonel Palu had been hammered by several small Soviet assaults throughout January. When Merezkov's forces approached the Mannerheim line, it took a while for the defenders to realize this was no small attack, but a full army assaulting them. Within hours, the Soviets managed to capture a section of the trenches while bombarding the entire line. Each day they renewed their attacks, focused on acquiring a bunker here or a dugout there. These assaults were very successful, and some positions would remain in permanent Soviet control, further lowering the morale of the Finns. Despite these losses, Palu had withstood the Soviet assaults by February 10th. But this was just the beginning, as one day later, the 19th and 50th Rifle Corps started a joint offensive. The star of this offensive would be the 123rd Rifle Division, which managed to push through the Finnish lines just east of Lake Suma and capture Poppius Bunker and all the strongpoints east of it. By afternoon, their attack had breached the Mannerheim line and reached the interim line at Lada. Meanwhile, Palu threw back the Soviet attacks at other locations along the front and launched a quick counter-offensive against the 123rd. This counterattack, however, lacked the arms and men needed and thus failed. As Mannerheim became aware of the breakthrough later that night, he immediately ordered the reserve 5th Division to the breach. In response, the Soviets started reinforcing the 123rd to capitalize on their success. 2 battalions from the 5th hastened to counterattack the enemy, but despite pushing back the Soviets, they would be driven back by Soviet tanks later that day. As the defenders recovered from their failed counter-offensive, the Soviets started a bombardment of the interim line, and their armoured forces rolled straight through the Finnish defences. Furthermore, just east of the Lada road, the invaders had created a gap in the defensive line. The following day, the Soviets would continue to widen the breach, while General Åquist threw every available reinforcement to stem this. If Lada fell, the Soviets could open up a passage in every direction through the isthmus. In the meantime, fierce combat was taking place in the Merki sector as the 19th Rifle Corps slowly progressed through the line of the 1st Division at great cost. By February 13th, the 90th Rifle Division had breached the Mannerheim line at Merki and managed to push in several kilometers. That night, Commander Merezkov noted their tremendous success and ordered his corps to exploit this opportunity. At the same time, Åquist gave permission for the 5th to start withdrawing eastward and for the 1st to retreat towards the northeast. On the other side, the Soviets would not follow the disengaged Finns.
Yeah, because it's crazy that even though, the Finns are going up against these huge numbers of Soviets, they're still being able to, and they are getting pushed back, they're still being able to get pushed back only a certain amount before, and still being able to retreat and regroup and, re-engage and all that stuff. So it's still pretty impressive because, at the end of the day, they are going up against the biggest, or if I'm not mistaken, either they're the second biggest next to Germany, or if not the biggest army at the time right now. So, it's pretty impressive regardless. So,
the disengaged Finns, instead consolidating. Meanwhile, Grendal's 13th Army had the objective of advancing through the Finnish defences to the road network on the Kelja-Kopikila-Järvesava line. On February 8th, the Soviets started their bombardment of the Taipale sector, and the 3rd Corps launched a wide front assault, resulting in the capture of 2 bases at the Tarentula hamlet. 2 Finnish counterattacks had failed to regain it, when a 3rd desperate effort managed to return these positions to their hands. Suffering heavy losses, General Heinrichs had halted Grendal's assault, but just as in Suma, this was just the beginning. On February 11th, the Soviets started a strong bombardment and launched a renewed offensive. The Finns fought tooth and nail, and at the end of the day, they would still be in control of their main defenses. Furthermore, a surprise attack near Savanto forced the Soviets to relinquish their newly captured positions. This came at a hefty price in manpower, and the 7th Division's soldiers would have to be reinforced with the fresh 21st Division. For the next week, the defensive line waved back and forth as the defenders kept recapturing the positions lost on the previous day. By February 17th, Heinrichs had withstood the main Soviet assault, and now the situation was stable for the Finns at Taipale. When Grendel realized this, he ordered the 49th and 150th Rifle Divisions to cease their attacks and instead wear down the defenders with an incessant bombardment. On February 14th, Mannerheim arrived to assess the situation on the front line. He quickly concluded that despite holding most of the main defences, the breaches at Lader and Merki forced the 2nd Corps to retreat to the interim line. One day later, the exhausted and battered Finns started their retreat, and the Red Army allowed them to do so. By February 17th, all Finnish forces had made it to their designated positions at the interim line, and they would be reinforced by the 23rd Division coming from the Kola River. The last Finns to withdraw were the soldiers of the 4th Division on the Koivisto Islands, who escaped by skiing over the frozen Viipuri Bay to its west bank, establishing critical defensive positions at the islands around the city of Viipuri. Meanwhile, the Soviets kept applying pressure, resuming attacks against the new line immediately after their enemies had manned it. On February 22nd, the 23rd finally arrived to relieve the depleted 5th Division, and together they managed to halt the Soviets for a few days. At the same time, Osterman was replaced by General Heinrichs. Furthermore, the experienced General Tavila would take control of the 3rd Corps, and General Latikainen would be assigned to command the new 1st Corps at the left flank of Orquist's 2nd. By February 18th, Grendel had restored the cohesion of his forces and ordered them to renew their assault.
Yeah, so it's starting to get a little bit. It's starting to I guess the last picture of this little war is starting to paint itself. I guess you can say where I'm starting to see why the Finns had to eventually sue for peace because if they had a bigger army, not even one that's equal to the Soviets, just a bigger army in general, they would be able to hold them back, and they probably wouldn't have had to sue for peace as like they did. But we can see, they're still able to hold their own. They're still able to hold these positions, but only for a short time because of the manpower that they have. So it's obvious that they eventually see that.
This offensive was especially successful around Kurvismäki, where the 150th Division routed a battalion of the 21st and took control of the strongholds on the southern side, while the 49th Division captured the forts at Tarentula, forcing the Finns to retreat to the interim line. After the fall of these defensive positions, the Soviets stopped their advance because they feared a Finnish counterattack, allowing Tavila to strengthen positions on the line one day later. The following night, the 7th Division launched a counter-offensive and took back control of the Tarentula sector. This position would go back and forth between the Finns and the Soviets, but by February 24th, the 7th Division had established more permanent positions. In March, Tavila issued a final retreat into the well-prepared bunkers of the rear line, but the war would end before Tavila reached and defended this last line. In the meantime, the 2nd Division of Colonel Koskimius would soon fall back to the concrete bunkers of the Arapa sector. As Taipale had proven too resilient, Grendel now directed his forces against these positions in the center of the interim line. Reinforced by the 19th Corps, the 23rd Rifle Corps was pushing north with the objective of securing the village of Antreia, while further east, the 15th Rifle Corps was assigned to cross the Voski River near the village of Arapa. Koskimius resisted the Soviet attacks as best he could, but by February 29th, Grendel exercised complete control of the interim line west of Arapa, forcing the 2nd Division to retreat to the rear line. but from the village eastwards, Koskimiers still controlled his defensive line. So Grendel ordered the 15th Corps to launch an offensive against Arapa's defenders. The commander planned to first destroy the defences on the south side of the Vorski and then proceed straight across the Finnish rear to take the village. In turn, Koskimiers left the 23rd Regiment to defend Arapa from the western assault of the 4th Rifle Division, while he came forth to the east to receive the combined attack of the 17th Motorized and 97th Rifle Divisions. On March 1st, the Soviet offensive began, achieving a breakthrough the following day. But this wouldn't last, as later that day, Koskimiers managed to recapture the lost positions and push back. As a result, Grendel was replaced due to his repeated failures by Perusinov, who immediately issued new orders for an assault. This offensive would fail as well, but on March 4th, the 50th Rifle Division defeated the 8th Division and took a strategic hill east of Vuosalmi. With the elevated firing positions against them, the Finns south of the Vuoksi River and at Arapa.
Yeah, these, in my opinion, just goes to show you, like, you know what I'm saying, what made them so formidable. And this was just like straight up numbers, like, because they're not able to do anything with anything that they have. Like, even with even with being over, outnumbering them and all that stuff, they're still being pushed back by, you know what I'm saying, only a couple, if not just, one division, which is granted probably a few hundred to a few thousand men, but still, you know what I'm saying, still, crazy to see. So let's see.
Would have to retreat to the shores. After the capture of Arapa, Perusinov continued his offensive against the large Vasikasari island in the center of the river. Although Koskimiers kept offering fierce resistance, the following day the 50th Division captured the island with great losses. On March 6th, the Finns attempted to regain the island, but Perusinov's forces repelled them and counterattacked, establishing a position on the shores of Vuosalmi. A fierce struggle ensued, in which Koskimiers ended up victorious, pushing the Soviets back to Vasikasari. Following this success, he would be reinforced by the 21st Division, and together they would manage to hold on until the end of the war. Meanwhile, as the rest of the 50th Corps continued their assault on the Lada breach, Meretskov had formed a new task force consisting of 2 tank brigades and 2 infantry battalions to take Viipuri on February 28th. But one day earlier, Erquist's forces had fully retreated to the still incomplete rear line, preventing this new offensive from ever launching. Meretskov, however, had managed to overrun the interim line in its whole length, and he was now preparing his forces for a final assault on the last Finnish defensive line. Right in front of Viipuri, the 3rd and 5th Divisions stood as their main obstacle, with the 4th Division protecting the bay to the west of the city. And immediately east from them, Latikainen's 1st Division had taken positions east of the Tali crossroads, with the 23rd Division at its west in the town of Repola. Meretskov planned to do a 2-pronged attack, with the bulk of the 7th Army skirting the city from the east to encircle the Finnish forces, while the 10th and the reservist 28th Rifle Corps had to cross the frozen bay west of Viipuri to secure the road to Helsinki. At this point, the Finnish government was working day and night to resolve the conflict peacefully before the invaders could do tremendous harm to their capital. The rear line had to be held, and Viipuri couldn't fall if they wanted to avoid complete occupation. Towards the end of February, overall command of Viipuri Bay was handed over to the newly formed Coastal Group, led by the experienced General Wallenius. Their situation was very perilous, as the bay was frozen, allowing Soviet tanks to cross it, and by March 1st, the Soviets had forced the 4th Division to retreat from the 2 large peninsulas extending into the bay. Wallenius then placed his forces on a line of islands extending to the port of Viipuri, directly facing the 3 divisions sent by Meretskov. When the offensive began, the 800-strong defenders at Tipura managed to hold their ground against the invaders, but they couldn't stop them from occupying the smaller islands.
It's too bad the Finnish couldn't set up artillery on the opposite side of the bay, so that whenever they did eventually, and inevitably know that they're going to get overtaken and the Soviets are going to have to cross this river, they could put some firepower on it and pull Napoleon and just blow the ice from right under them. That would have been pretty, nice little last-stage effort anyway, but let's see.
Just north of the line. The following night, however, the Finns at Tapura found their position untenable and had to retreat to Teikasari Island. They would continue to resist there for an entire day before retreating to their final position at the Villaniemi Peninsula. At the same time, Wallenius faced a great threat when the Soviets skied over to the Haranpaniemi Peninsula and drove back the coastal defenders. But by March 3rd, the peninsula was back in Finnish hands. This forced Wallenius to order a retreat from the island line to concentrate at Turkinsaari, but despite his best efforts, he would then be replaced because of the disorganized state of his forces. In the meantime, Meretskov launched his eastern offensive against Viipuri on March 1st. The 34th Rifle Corps had the task of directly assaulting the city from the south and from the northeast, where the 5th Division stood in defense, while the 50th Corps advanced in the direction of Repola to eliminate the 23rd Division. On March 2nd, the 3rd Division defending Viipuri itself was assaulted by the 7th and 95th Rifle Divisions, and the Soviets managed to create a breach on the southern edge of the city. But the 3rd would continue to hold the Soviet attacks on the following days, further preventing the invaders from sweeping into the city. Simultaneously, the heroic 1st Division was holding down the 50th Corps on the Tali crossroads, and the 5th and 23rd Divisions were also resisting the relentless enemy attacks. Back at the bay, the new commander of the coastal group, General Lennart Oesch, decided to recapture the key Teikasari Island on March 4th. This would fail, and soon the 86th Motorized Rifle Division created a bridgehead on the Haranpaniemi Peninsula. Oesch quickly launched a counterattack to regain this position, but by March 5th, the 86th couldn't be dislodged. At the same time, the Finns in Villaniemi were finally routed, so the Soviets continued eastwards towards Viipuri until they were stopped on the Kajaaniemi Peninsula. The next day, Oesch attempted to recapture Villaniemi.
Yeah, I'm surprised the Finnish didn't fortify those positions over there on the other side of the river. Obviously, since that is the main one of the main routes to Helsinki and stuff like that. But I understand why, mainly because I'm sure that they just didn't have the manpower, just didn't have it to do it with. But still, it kind of sucks to see that they couldn't. At least, Let's keep going.
With both sides suffering heavy losses. Although the Finns had contained this breach, the Soviets had managed to cut off the road to Helsinki, achieving their main goal. With Viipuri isolated from the capital, Finnish Prime Minister Risto Ryti was finally granted permission from Moscow to travel there and start the peace talks. While these negotiations lasted, Heinrichs and Mannerheim knew that they needed to hold the invaders at bay. On March 9th, the 70th Rifle Division on Villaniemi was reinforced by the 173rd Motorized Rifle Division, and one day later they advanced northwards beyond the road. Towards Viipuri, they would finally be stopped by the recently assembled Group Varko coming from the city. Meanwhile, on Uras Island, the 4th Division was enjoying great success on March 9th against the 43rd Rifle Division, and only after being reinforced by the 42nd and 113th Rifle Divisions did the 43rd manage to capture the island. The rest of the island would be lost the following day, and the 4th would have to retreat to the Koivuniemi Peninsula in defense of the coast. Simultaneously, Meretskov launched a new main offensive against Viipuri on March 11th. But the Finns fought to the last man and resisted both the artillery barrage and the Soviets' incessant attacks. Orquist's position was becoming untenable with each passing day, and so he requested permission to abandon the city. But Mannerheim knew the importance of maintaining Viipuri, and he knew that the war was near its end, so he ordered his men to maintain the city at all costs. On March 12th, Meretskov was preparing for a final assault on the surrounded Viipuri, coming both from south and west. But before the Soviets could exploit their breakthrough on the city, Ryti capitulated to Stalin's terms. A day later, the terms of the Moscow Peace Treaty were announced, and the fighting stopped. Immediately, the majority of Heinrich's forces started to withdraw to the newly agreed borders, while the depleted 3rd Division remained in Viipuri to lower down the national flag, as the city had been annexed by the Soviet Union. The territorial losses that Finland suffered ended up being more than what the Soviets initially demanded. Although the war ended in defeat, it was remarkable that the Finns had managed to hold on for so long against the Soviet onslaught. The Finnish casualties were around 70,000, 25,000 among them dead. More than 150,000 Red Army soldiers were killed, and 200,000 more were wounded.
Yeah, and we can see with those numbers, we can see exactly why Hitler literally, like a year later, not even a year later, a few months later, like if I'm not mistaken, just said, let's do it. I don't see any other better time. Like, if the Finnish can do this, a newly, formed country can do this to them, imagine what we can. So we can see, I see why he took advantage of that. But let's go ahead and finish this out together.
The Soviets also lost around 400 aircraft and more than 3,000 tanks, which would prove to be important when Hitler attacked the USSR 15 months later. The attack that the Finns joined, starting the Continuation War. We will continue covering modern wars in the upcoming weeks, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our...
Alright guys, we'll go ahead and end it right there. So yeah, definitely a great battle or war series on Winter War, just proving that, it doesn't matter how big or massive an army or a country is, as long as you have, pride, heart, and some really great soldiers, you can pretty much do what you need to do to at least secure your country's sovereignty. But in any case, so guys, thank you again for joining me on another episode of Mike's Intellectual Corner. Say peace out to Winston. I'll see you guys when I see you. I'm out.